A blind woman overhears a chilling whisper in the dead of night. Her husband and son are speaking in hushed voices about getting rid of her. And the next day she wakes up in a moving car, completely at their mercy. Before start, let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. Lauren lay in bed, listening to the rhythmic breathing of her husband, Mark, beside her. She had grown accustomed to the darkness over the years, but something about tonight felt different, off. She turned her head slightly, straining her ears. Voices. Low, urgent whispers coming from the hallway. Lauren's brow furrowed. Who else was awake at this hour? She pushed the covers aside and sat up, tilting her head toward the sound. It was Mark. And was that Tyler? Their 15-year-old son? Lauren moved cautiously, sliding her feet onto the cold hardwood floor. She reached for her cane but hesitated. She knew this house like the back of her hand. She could navigate it blindfolded, even if she wasn't already blind. Barefoot, she stepped toward the door, keeping her breathing steady. The closer she got, the clearer their voices became. "She'll be a problem," Mark muttered. "No, Dad." Tyler's voice was shaky, urgent. We can't do this to her." Lauren's fingers tightened around the doorknob. A cold weight settled in her chest. "It has to happen soon," Mark said, his voice edged with frustration. "She can't stay here much longer." Lauren's breath hitched. "Stay here?" Her pulse quickened. Were they talking about her? "But she's my mom." Tyler's whisper was harsh, almost breaking. I won't let you do it." "You don't have a choice," Mark said, his tone final. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Lauren's mind raced. This is a misunderstanding. It has to be. But deep down she knew. She could hear it in Mark's voice. There was no warmth, no hesitation. Her heart pounded in her ears. She wanted to push open the door, confront them, demand an explanation. But fear, cold, paralyzing fear, held her in place. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked beneath her foot. The whispers stopped. Lauren froze, her breath caught in her throat. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Coming toward her. She backed away, her pulse thundering. The door opened just a crack. "Mom?" Tyler's voice was quiet, hesitant. Lauren struggled to keep her own voice steady. "What are you doing up, sweetheart?" There was a long pause. Then Tyler exhaled shakily. "Nothing. Just couldn't sleep." Lauren forced a smile, though her stomach churned. "Me neither." Behind Tyler she could hear Mark shifting. She didn't need to see him to know he was watching. Calculating. "Go back to bed," Mark said, his voice eerily calm. Lauren hesitated. "Now." Tyler didn't move. Lauren swallowed hard and nodded. "Okay." She turned slowly, retreating into the safety of their bedroom. She could feel Mark's gaze boring into her back until the door clicked shut behind her. Only then did she allow the shiver to run down her spine. She climbed back into bed, lying stiffly beside Mark. His breathing was even, steady, as if nothing had happened. But Lauren knew better. As she lay in the darkness, questions swirled in her mind. What did he mean? Why is he talking about getting rid of me? She turned her head toward Mark. He didn't move. But she wasn't fooled. She wasn't safe. And now she knew it. Tyler's muffled voice, barely above a whisper, reached her through the closed door. "Dad, we can't do this to Mom." A moment of silence. Then, Mark's voice, sharp and final. "Go to bed, Tyler. Now." Lauren's blood ran cold. Lauren barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, Mark's voice echoed in her mind. She can't stay here much longer. What did that mean? Was he planning to leave her? Send her away? Or was it something worse? Lying awake beside him, she could hear his steady breathing, too even, too calm. Was he really asleep, or was he pretending just like she was? She couldn't take it anymore. Carefully, she slipped out of bed, feeling for her cane. She didn't use it often in the house, she had memorized every inch. But tonight, she needed the security. She moved as quietly as possible, listening for any sign that Mark or Tyler had woken up. Nothing. Still, she kept her steps light as she made her way downstairs. The kitchen was silent except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator. She ran her hand along the counter, steadying herself, thinking. If Mark was planning something, if she was in danger, there had to be proof. A sign. Something. Her fingers curled into fists. She needed answers. Lauren hesitated at the basement door. The wooden steps creaked underfoot, and she moved carefully, gripping the railing. The air down here was different, cooler, musty. She felt along the wall for the light switch. Nothing. Mark had mentioned last week that the basement light was out. Convenient, she thought bitterly. She reached for the shelving unit along the far wall, feeling for the storage bins. Her fingers brushed against plastic, then cardboard. Mark kept old files down here, paperwork, junk, things he never wanted to throw away. She traced the edges of the shelves, searching for something out of place. Her fingertips caught the rough surface of an old shoebox shoved behind a stack of books. Something about it felt wrong. She lifted the box carefully, feeling its weight. It was heavier than she expected. She ran her fingers along the lid, her breath catching when she found a small lock keeping it shut. Lauren's heart pounded. "What are you hiding, Mark?" She turned, searching the shelves again. If Mark hid the box here, the key had to be close. She patted down the nearby shelves, running her hands along every surface. Her fingers grazed something small and metallic behind a stack of magazines. A key. She grabbed it and hesitated. If she opened this box, there was no turning back. Whatever she found inside, she couldn't unlearn. But the memory of Tyler's whisper, "Dad, we can't do this to Mom," pushed her forward. She slid the key into the lock. It clicked open. Inside, nestled between old documents and receipts, was a phone. Not hers. Not Mark's. Her pulse quickened. She traced its edges, feeling for buttons. It was an older model, bulky. Lauren swallowed hard and pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. She had no idea what the passcode could be, but Mark wasn't exactly creative when it came to passwords. She typed in the one he used for everything, his bank account, his email, even the security system. It unlocked. Her hands trembled as she swiped through the messages. There were only a few texts, all from an unknown number. The most recent message sent ice through her veins. "It has to happen soon. I'll take care of it." Lauren gasped, her breath hitching in her throat. The phone slipped from her fingers and hit the concrete floor with a dull thud. She stood frozen in the dark basement, her mind racing. What does this mean? Who sent this? What is Mark planning? Footsteps creaked overhead. Lauren's breath caught. Mark was awake. Understand. She scrambled to pick up the phone, gripping it tightly. The basement door creaked open. "Lauren?" Mark's voice called down the stairs. She barely had time to shove the phone into her pocket before his shadow loomed at the top step. A sharp jolt. Lauren stirred, her head heavy, her body swaying. The low hum of an engine filled her ears, the familiar vibration of a moving car beneath her. Confusion settled in. Why am I in a car? She reached out instinctively, feeling the smooth leather beneath her hands. Then she heard it. The steady grip of fingers tightening around a steering wheel. The controlled, measured breaths of the man driving. Mark. And then, another sound. Unsteady, rapid breathing coming from behind her. Tyler. Lauren's pulse spiked. What's going on? Her voice was hoarse, dry. No answer. She turned her head, trying to orient herself. The air smelled of leather and faint cologne. Mark's. The hum of passing cars told her they were on a main road. Mark? She tried again, her throat tightening. Where are we going? Still nothing. Her stomach twisted. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm. He flinched. Just sit back, Mark muttered, his voice tight. It's better this way. Better this way? Lauren's breathing turned shallow. She turned to the back seat. Tyler? Silence. Then, in a broken whisper, "Mom, I'm sorry." Her blood ran cold. She gripped the door handle, her heart pounding. The engine rumbled beneath her feet as the car kept moving. Faster. She knew she had to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't help her. "Mark," she said carefully, forcing her voice to remain steady. "You're scaring me. Please, what's happening?" The tires hummed over asphalt. A long empty road. The lack of city noise told her they had left town. Lauren swallowed, her mind racing. Then she felt it. The phone. The one she had found in the basement was still tucked into the pocket of her sweatpants. She could reach it. The car suddenly lurched to the side, throwing her against the door. "We're almost there," Mark muttered. "Almost where?" Lauren's voice cracked. Still no answer. She tried again, this time with a sharper edge. "If you don't tell me what's happening, I swear." "You swear what, Lauren?" Mark snapped, his tone ice cold. "What exactly do you think you're going to do?" Lauren flinched. This wasn't her husband's usual sharp frustration. This was something different. Something darker. Her fingers curled into fists. She needed to act, and fast. "Tyler, baby, listen to me." She turned her head toward the back seat. "I don't know what's going on, but you need to talk to me." A shaky breath. "Then, I tried, Mom. I tried to stop him." Lauren's heart nearly stopped. "You shut your mouth," Mark snapped. Tyler sniffled, his breath uneven. Lauren's world was spinning, and not because of the moving car. Mark was taking her somewhere, and Tyler was too afraid to stop him. Her mind flashed to the text she found on the secret phone. "It has to happen soon. I'll take care of it." A wave of nausea rolled through her. She needed a plan. Lauren's fingers inched toward her pocket, grazing the phone. She could text 911. The car jerked to a sudden stop, tires crunching over loose gravel. Lauren's body lurched forward. Her breath caught. Everything went silent. No passing cars. No streetlights buzzing. No city hum. Nothing but an open, deserted road. A chill ran down her spine. Mark threw the car into park. Then he turned to her. "Get out." Lauren's hands clenched around the seatbelt strap. "What?" "You heard me." She swallowed hard, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "Mark, you don't have to do this." His jaw tensed. "Get out." Tyler gasped from the back seat. "Dad, please?" "Stay in the car, Tyler." Mark's voice was cold. Lauren's mind spun, her fingers tightening on the phone. She had seconds to decide. Mark's door clicked open. He stepped out. A second later, her door opened too. A rush of cold air hit her. "Lauren," Mark's voice was eerily calm, "this is where you get out." The roar of the car engine faded into the distance, swallowed by the emptiness of the night. Lauren stood motionless on the side of the desolate road, her pulse hammering against her ribs. Mark was gone. Tyler was gone. And she was alone. The cold wind cut through the thin fabric of her pajamas, and the gravel beneath her bare feet sent sharp pains up her legs. She had no idea where she was, only that Mark had taken her far from the city, far from anyone she knew. Her hands trembled as she pulled the phone from her pocket, the one she had taken from the locked box in the basement. She pressed the power button. Nothing. Dead. A strangled sob caught in her throat. She had nothing. No way to call for help. No way to see where she was going. Lauren swallowed hard, forcing back the panic. She couldn't afford to shut down. She turned her head, listening, searching for any sign of life. The silence pressed in around her, suffocating. But then, far in the distance, a car. Hope flared in her chest. She stumbled forward, waving her arms. "Help. Please, someone help me." The headlights grew closer. Lauren's heart pounded as she waved frantically. "Please stop." The car didn't slow. She stepped onto the edge of the road, desperation in her voice. "Please?" The vehicle whooshed past her, a gust of cold air whipping against her skin. She spun around, coughing as dust kicked up in its wake. Her hands balled into fists. Another car approached. She braced herself, stepping closer to the road. "Help. Please." This time, she heard laughter as the car sped up. Lauren barely had time to react before something, an empty soda can, was hurled at her. It struck her arm, sending a sharp sting through her skin. Tires screeched as the car disappeared, the echo of their cruel laughter ringing in her ears. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I can't stay here. I have to keep moving. She turned toward the road and started walking. Hours passed. No one stopped. Her feet ached. The cold seeped into her bones. She had lost track of time. Her body was weak, her head pounding from dehydration and exhaustion. Still she walked. Still she called for help. Still no one came. Her mind played tricks on her, shadows shifting in the distance, the wind whispering Mark's voice. She was unraveling. A fresh wave of dizziness hit and she stumbled, her knees crashing onto the gravel. Lauren gasped, her hands scraping against the jagged stones. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts. She tried to push herself up. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. A chill slithered down her spine. Lauren's head snapped up. Hello. Laughter. Low and amused. Then another voice. Well, what do we have here? Her stomach dropped. 3 distinct sets of footsteps. Moving closer. She forced herself to stand, her legs shaking beneath her. I don't want trouble, she stammered. More laughter. One of the men whistled. Look at that. All alone in the dark. Where you headed, sweetheart? Another sneered. Lauren took a step back. Just let me pass. A hand brushed against her arm. She jerked away. The first man chuckled. Relax, lady. We're just being friendly. Another set of footsteps circled behind her. You need help? We can help. Lauren's pulse raced. She turned sharply, trying to sense where they all were. Stay away from me. Silence. Then, a low, cruel whisper. Make us. A hand grabbed her wrist. Lauren screamed. She twisted violently, trying to break free. Another hand shoved her shoulder, sending her stumbling backward. Her foot caught on the uneven ground and she crashed onto the dirt. Pain shot through her palms as she caught herself. More laughter. Terror clawed at her chest. She opened her mouth to scream again. Leave her alone. The voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Lauren's breath hitched. The men went silent. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Then a figure stepped into the faint glow of distant headlights. An older woman, her posture rigid, her voice steady. Lauren's fingers dug into the dirt, her heart hammering. You heard me, the woman said, her voice laced with steel. Walk away. One of the men scoffed. Lady, this ain't your business. The woman took another step forward. You really want to test me? Something about her tone sent a ripple of unease through the group. Lauren could feel it, the moment of hesitation. Then a curse under someone's breath. Footsteps retreating. One by one they backed away. Another moment of silence. Then, the sound of them leaving. Lauren's entire body sagged with relief. The woman knelt beside her. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Lauren trembled. Who are you? A gentle hand grasped hers, warm and steady. My name is Margaret, the woman said softly. And you're safe now. Lauren felt the warmth before she fully woke. A thick, heavy blanket cocooned her, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she wasn't shivering. The scent of coffee lingered in the air, rich and inviting. Her body ached, her muscles stiff from walking for hours, but it was nothing compared to the exhaustion weighing on her mind. She shifted, the mattress beneath her soft and unfamiliar. Easy now. Lauren flinched at the voice. It was the same one from last night, the woman who had saved her. Margaret. You're safe, Margaret reassured her. Take your time. Lauren exhaled slowly. Safe. She repeated the word in her head, willing herself to believe it. She pushed herself up, her movements sluggish. Where am I? Her voice was rough, hoarse from thirst. A women's shelter, Margaret said gently. You needed somewhere warm. Somewhere safe. A shelter. Lauren swallowed hard. It wasn't home, but it wasn't the freezing, desolate road where she had been left to die. She had no home anymore, did she? The thought made her chest tighten, but she forced herself to stay present. A warm ceramic mug was pressed into her hands. Drink, Margaret urged. Lauren hesitated before taking a sip. Coffee. Slightly sweet, just the way she liked it. How did you find me? She asked, her voice quieter. Margaret sat on the chair beside the bed. I was coming back from a night shift when I saw those men circling you. Pause. Didn't like the way it looked. Lauren shivered. They would've, she cut herself off, shaking her head. I don't even want to think about it. Margaret patted her hand. But you don't have to, because it didn't happen. You're here now. Lauren nodded, though the relief felt fragile. For the first time since waking, she let herself take in her surroundings. The bed beneath her was small but comfortable. The air smelled of fabric softener and warm bread. Faint voices drifted in from the hallway. Other women stay here too? Margaret nodded. Some for a few nights, some for longer. No one asks questions, but if you want to talk, I'll listen. Lauren hesitated. Part of her wanted to bury everything that had happened. If she spoke the words out loud, it would make it all real. But another part of her, the one that had been surviving on sheer will, knew she needed to let someone in. So she told Margaret everything. The truth comes out. Lauren spoke slowly at first, but once she started, the words wouldn't stop. She told Margaret about the whispers in the night, the locked box, the secret phone. About the text message that made her blood run cold. About Mark driving her into the middle of nowhere, abandoning her as if she were nothing. About Tyler. When she finished, her throat felt raw, and she couldn't hold back the tears that followed. Margaret sat in silence for a long time, her fingers laced together. Then she sighed. That man, your husband, he's a dangerous one. Lauren nodded, unable to speak. Margaret reached for her hand, squeezing gently. You listen to me, sweetheart. You didn't deserve that. None of it. Lauren wiped at her face, breathing through the lingering panic. Then Margaret said something that made her freeze. You know, someone's been looking for you. Lauren's fingers stilled around the coffee mug. What? Margaret leaned forward. A man. Name's Ethan. Lauren's stomach flipped. Ethan? The name felt distant, like a memory she couldn't quite place. Margaret nodded. He's been calling around, asking if anyone's seen a blind woman named Lauren. Said she helped him once and he swore he'd return the favor if she ever needed it. Lauren's grip tightened on the mug. Ethan. She had helped a man named Ethan years ago. It had been a brief, chance encounter. He had been in an accident, disoriented and bleeding, and she had called for help when no one else had stopped. He had been grateful, but she never expected to hear from him again. She swallowed hard. He's looking for me? Margaret nodded. And something tells me he's not going to stop until he finds you. Lauren's hands trembled. Someone out there was looking for her. Someone who wasn't trying to get rid of her. For the first time in days, the weight pressing down on her chest lifted. Just a little. Margaret squeezed her hand again, her voice warm but firm. He swore he would help you if you ever needed it, Lauren. Lauren sat on the edge of the small bed, her hands resting on her lap, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the fabric of the blanket. The quiet murmurs of women outside the door and the hum of a radio playing from the common area filled the air, but none of it settled her. Margaret had told her Ethan was coming. She hadn't seen him in years, had barely thought of him except as a distant memory. Could he really be the same man she had helped all those years ago? And why had he been looking for her so relentlessly? Her heart pounded in her chest, a mixture of anticipation and fear. What if he had changed? What if she had misjudged him? What? A knock on the door cut through her thoughts. Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. Lauren, he's here. Lauren inhaled sharply, her pulse racing. She wiped her damp palms on her sweatpants and stood slowly. Okay. Margaret pushed the door open wider, and Lauren could feel the shift in the air as someone stepped inside. A moment of silence stretched between them. Then a voice, deep, familiar but filled with something heavier now. Lauren. She swallowed hard. Ethan? A soft, almost relieved chuckle. Yeah, it's me. He sounded different, older maybe. What? But there was no mistaking the warmth in his voice. Lauren let out a shaky breath. I don't even know what to say. She felt movement in front of her, then the light brush of his hand against hers. It wasn't forceful or urgent, just an offering. A way to ground her if she needed it. She took it. His grip was warm, steady. And for the first time in days she felt something other than fear. They sat together in the small room, the weight of unspoken words pressing between them. Lauren didn't know where to begin, but Ethan was patient. So she told him everything. The whispers. The fear. The moment she realized Mark wasn't the man she thought he was. The text message that confirmed her worst nightmare. The drive in the middle of the night, the way Mark had abandoned her like she was disposable. When she spoke of Tyler, her voice cracked. I don't know where he is. I don't even know if he's okay. Silence. Then Ethan exhaled slowly. That bastard. Lauren's breath hitched at the fury in his voice. It wasn't just anger, it was rage. He left you in the middle of nowhere, Ethan said through clenched teeth. And now your son, his son, is missing? Lauren nodded, swallowing hard. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his movements sharp and restless. I swear to you, Lauren, we're going to find Tyler. And we're going to make damn sure Mark pays for this. His words were solid, unshaken. Lauren wanted to believe him. But the weight of betrayal pressed down on her like a crushing force. How could she have been so blind? How could the man she married, the father of her child, do this to her? I don't understand, she whispered, her voice raw. He wasn't always like this. Mark, he used to love me. I know he did. Ethan's jaw tightened. People like him, they don't change overnight. He's been this way for a long time. You just didn't see it because you loved him. Lauren felt a lump in her throat. I still don't want to believe it. Ethan's voice softened. I know, but you have to. She turned her face toward him, trying to read his tone. Why did you look for me, Ethan? Pause. Then. Because you saved me once, he admitted. Years ago you found me after my accident. You didn't even know me, but you stayed. Called for help. You sat with me until the ambulance came. I never forgot that. Lauren swallowed hard. She remembered. She had never expected anything in return. I told myself that if you ever needed help, I'd be there, Ethan continued. And then, a few weeks ago, I heard rumors, people talking about Mark, about something being off. I tried reaching you, but your number was disconnected. And then, I heard you were missing. Lauren's breath caught. You've been looking for me this whole time? Ethan nodded. Yeah. And now that I found you, I'm not leaving until we fix this. His voice carried a certainty Lauren hadn't felt in days. Understand. Ethan squeezed her hand gently, his voice steady. You're not alone, Lauren. We'll find your son. Lauren's hands trembled as she sat in the passenger seat of Ethan's car. The hum of the engine beneath her barely registered over the pounding in her chest. They were going to find Mark. The man who had left her in the middle of nowhere. The man who had taken her son. Ethan had tracked him down with disturbing ease. Mark was still in their home. Their home. Living his life as if nothing had happened. Lauren gritted her teeth. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. Ethan pulled the car to a stop across the street from the house. Lauren could feel it, the familiarity, the memories clinging to the air like ghosts. She didn't need to see it to know every inch of that house. The creak in the porch steps. The way the wind rattled the mailbox on stormy nights. It had been her home. But now it was just a crime scene. You ready for this? Ethan asked. Lauren inhaled sharply. I have to be. She didn't wait for him. She opened the car door and stepped out, the cool air biting her skin. The walk to the front door felt endless. Ethan was a silent force beside her. Lauren raised her hand and knocked, hard. Silence. Then footsteps. The door swung open and Mark's voice was clipped. What the hell? He stopped. Lauren didn't need to see him to know he had gone pale. Lauren? She stood tall. Surprised to see me? Mark's breath hitched. Then his tone turned cold. You need to leave. Ethan stepped forward. Not happening. Mark let out a sharp breath. You don't understand? Oh, I understand plenty, Lauren cut in, her voice sharper than she thought possible. I understand that you left me to die. That you lied to our son. That you... Her voice broke. She swallowed the pain. Ethan crossed his arms. Where is Tyler? Pause. Mark scoffed. He's fine. Lauren's heart slammed against her ribs. Where is he, Mark? He sighed as if they were discussing something as trivial as dinner plans. He's staying with a friend. Ethan's jaw clenched. What friend? Mark shrugged. Just someone he knows from school. Lauren shook her head. You're lying. Mark exhaled sharply. Look, he needed space. Space. Ethan's voice was venomous. You abandoned his mother. You expect us to believe you just let him go to a friend's house. Mark's silence was louder than any confession. Lauren's breath came in short bursts. Mark, she whispered, where is our son? Mark rubbed his forehead, his frustration slipping through. I told you. Ethan grabbed the front of Mark's shirt and shoved him back against the doorframe. Lauren gasped. Mark cursed. Are you out of your damn mind? Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. I'm done playing games. Tell me where he is. Lauren's nails dug into her palms. For a long moment, Mark didn't speak. Then, under the weight of Ethan's fury, his defenses cracked. His voice was quiet. I don't know where he is. Lauren's stomach dropped. What? Mark swallowed. I dropped him off at a bus station a few nights ago. Lauren staggered back as if she had been struck. No. Mark exhaled. I didn't have a choice. He wouldn't stop asking about you. He was going to tell someone. I had to. You left him alone? Lauren's scream was raw, full of horror. Mark flinched. I thought he'd go stay with his grandparents. Lauren's breath caught in her throat. He doesn't even know them. I figured he'd. Figured. Ethan shoved Mark again. You figured? Mark's voice turned defensive. I had to cover my tracks. I couldn't risk him saying anything. Lauren felt her knees go weak. Tyler was out there. Alone. Her baby. Her hands curled into fists. She lunged forward and shoved Mark with all the strength she had left. You bastard, she sobbed. Mark barely stumbled, but Ethan caught her before she could do more damage. Lauren's body trembled violently, anger and panic warring inside her. Where is my son? She screamed. Mark didn't answer. Lauren was shaking. Her world was unraveling. And somewhere out there her son was lost. Ethan turned to her, his voice urgent. We'll find him, Lauren. But all she could do was whisper, we have to. The moment the words left Mark's mouth, Lauren felt as if the ground had been ripped out from under her. Tyler. Alone. A bus station. Her baby was out there, terrified, searching for her. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his phone and dialed. We need to report a missing child, he said, his voice tight with urgency. Lauren could barely breathe as Ethan relayed the details to the dispatcher. Her mind spun with images of Tyler, standing alone in the cold, watching strangers pass by, waiting for help that never came. Mark stood stiffly by the doorway, his arms crossed. You're overreacting, he muttered. Lauren snapped her head toward him, fury lighting up inside her. Overreacting? Ethan turned on him. You're lucky I don't put you through that damn wall. Mark scoffed but didn't argue. He knew he was in deep. Lauren clenched her fists, pushing past the rage. She couldn't waste time. Every second they stood here, Tyler was still out there. The police were coming. That wasn't enough. She had to find her son. Mobilizing the search. Minutes later, 2 officers arrived. Lauren barely processed their questions. Her age, her son's description, what he was wearing the last time she saw him. The words spilled out of her like a frantic prayer. The lead officer, a stocky man with a calm but firm tone, nodded. We'll issue an alert right away. We'll also check security footage from the bus station. Lauren nodded rapidly, gripping Ethan's arm for support. I need to help look, she said. The officer hesitated. Ma'am, the best thing you can do is... I need to help look. Her voice cracked, but she didn't care. The officer sighed, then nodded. All right. Let's start with the bus station. Ethan squeezed her shoulder. We'll find him. She could only nod, her breath shaky as they rushed out the door, following the trail. The bus station was nearly empty by the time they arrived. The overhead lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the pavement. Lauren's heart pounded as she stepped out of the car. Where would he go? She murmured, gripping Ethan's arm tightly. He wouldn't have money for a ticket, Ethan reasoned. If he panicked, he might have gone somewhere familiar. The officer walked toward the ticket counter, flashing his badge. We need to check your security cameras for footage of a 15-year-old boy. He may have been here alone. Lauren waited, her hands gripping the hem of her sweater so hard she thought she'd rip it. Minutes passed. Then, we got him, the officer called over. Lauren's breath caught. They led her to the small security room. On the grainy black and white screen, she saw a familiar figure. Tyler, sitting on a bench, his backpack clutched to his chest. He looked so small. He was here, the officer said. 2 nights ago. Lauren's chest squeezed painfully. 2 nights. Where did he go? Ethan asked. The officer fast-forwarded through the footage. Tyler shifted on the bench, glancing around nervously. Then, after an agonizing few minutes, he stood and walked off-screen. Lauren's stomach twisted. Where did he go? She whispered. The officer's radio crackled. We've got a possible sighting. Park surveillance caught a match on the boy's description earlier today. Lauren clung to Ethan's arm. A park? Yeah, a few miles from here. Looks like he stayed in the area. Lauren exhaled sharply. He's still close. The officer spoke into his radio. Send a unit to investigate. Then, another crackle. The officer's head lifted. A voice on the other end. We found something. Lauren's knees nearly buckled. Ethan caught her, steadying her as she gasped. Tyler, she whispered. The officer turned toward them, his expression unreadable. Let's go, he said. Lauren held onto Ethan's arm as they rushed toward the car, her heart pounding louder than ever before. They had found something. But was it him? Lauren's hands were ice cold as she sat in the back seat of the police cruiser. The rush of wind against the windows was the only sound she could hear over the pounding of her heart. Ethan sat beside her, tense, ready to move the second they stopped. The officer in the front seat had barely finished his transmission when they sped toward the park. "We found something." The words echoed in her head. Was it him? Lauren clutched Ethan's arm. "If it's not, it is." His voice was firm, unwavering. "It has to be." She nodded quickly, even as fear wrapped itself around her throat. Then brakes screeched. The car jerked to a stop. Lauren's stomach lurched. The door opened and a rush of cold air hit her skin. She felt Ethan's hand on her arm, guiding her out. Then she heard it. Soft sniffles. Shaky breathing. Her knees nearly buckled. "Tyler," she whispered. A sharp intake of breath. Then, "Mom?" Lauren gasped. Footsteps. Then, Tyler ran into her arms. She barely had time to brace herself before his weight hit her full force, his arms wrapping around her, his body trembling with quiet sobs. Lauren dropped to her knees on the pavement, holding him tightly. Her fingers tangled in his hair, her breath shuddering as she rocked him back and forth. "Baby," she choked. "Oh baby, I've got you." His fingers clutched at her sweater, gripping her like she might disappear again. I thought you were gone," he sobbed. Lauren pulled back, cupping his face, running her hands over his cheeks, his arms, his shoulders. "You're safe," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "You're safe now." His chest heaved. He said you weren't coming back." Lauren's heart clenched. "He lied to you, sweetheart." "He lied. I never stopped looking for you." Tyler broke down again, burying his face in her shoulder. Ethan stepped forward. "You good kid?" Tyler lifted his head, sniffling. He nodded hesitantly. Ethan exhaled, his hands resting on his hips. "Scared the hell out of us, you know that?" Tyler let out a shaky laugh, barely there, but it was something. Lauren pressed her lips to his hair. "We're going home, baby." Tyler clutched her tighter. "We don't have a home." Lauren froze. A lump formed in her throat. Before she could respond, the police officer cleared his throat. "There's one more thing." Lauren lifted her head. The officer's radio crackled. "We've got him." Ethan stiffened. "Mark?" The officer nodded. "Picked him up at the house." "But that's not all." Lauren's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" The officer sighed. "You might want to hear this." Lauren held Tyler close as the officer gestured toward the police car. Whatever was coming next, she knew it wasn't over yet. The courtroom was colder than Lauren expected. She sat beside Ethan, her fingers curled tightly around Tyler's hand as they listened to the judge's final ruling. Given the overwhelming evidence, the court finds Mark Sullivan guilty on all counts, including child endangerment, fraud, and the unlawful abandonment of a dependent. Lauren exhaled sharply, her chest tightening with relief. The sound of the gavel hitting the wood sent a finality through the air. It was over. Mark was going to prison. She didn't hear the rest of the proceedings. Her mind drifted, focusing only on Tyler beside her. Her son. Safe. When the bailiffs escorted Mark out of the courtroom, he turned once, his cold, unreadable gaze locking onto her. Lauren didn't flinch. She didn't look away. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of him. 3 weeks later, Lauren stood in the doorway of their new home. It wasn't big. It wasn't extravagant. But it was theirs. The air smelled of fresh paint and something warm from the kitchen. Margaret's doing, no doubt. The shelter had helped them for as long as they needed, and when Ethan had found them this little house, everything had started falling into place. It was a quiet town, far from the memories of their past. A place to heal. Tyler ran his fingers over the new wooden banister. "It doesn't creak," he said softly. Lauren smiled. "Not yet, anyway." He let out a small chuckle, the sound lighting something inside her. Ethan set a box down near the couch, stretching his arms. "All right, that's the last of it." Lauren turned toward him. "I still don't know how to thank you." Ethan waved her off. "Don't even start." She tilted her head. "Why did you do all of this? You barely knew me." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his expression serious. "Because you helped me when no one else did." Lauren swallowed the lump in her throat. Ethan glanced at Tyler, then back at her. "And because good people deserve second chances." Lauren nodded, emotion swelling in her chest. She stepped out onto the porch, feeling the cool evening breeze on her skin. She inhaled deeply. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel suffocating. She felt free. Tyler joined her, standing beside her on the porch. For a long time neither of them spoke. Then Tyler reached for her hand, squeezing gently. His voice was quiet, filled with something she hadn't heard in so long: peace. "We're finally safe, Mom?" Lauren smiled, squeezing his hand back. "Yes," she whispered. "We are." And for the first time in forever, she believed it.